Hello again, this is Knud Eriksen from Denmark. I'm here as part of a seminar. It's called the Revolt Against Civilization, and I've just found Professor MacDonald, who's come here from the USA to visit us and to take part in the seminar and give us a very interesting speech. He's very well known, hardly needs an introduction anymore, but I'll still try to make one. He's a professor of psychology. He is an author, has written several books, especially on the Jews and their cultural methods, you could say, their survival techniques, is how he phrases it. He's best known for his use of evolutionary psychology to understanding Judaism as being a so-called group evolutionary strategy. He's written these books, very scholarly books. The first, I think, was Judaism as a Group Evolutionary Strategy. Then came, a few years later, Separation and its Discontents. That was in 1998, and the first one was in 1994. Then came The Cultural Critique. So that's a trilogy about Jewish survival strategies. And the last one, which I think is only a couple of years old, was Understanding Jewish Influence. And then, of course, Dr. and Professor MacDonald has written maybe hundreds of articles, also done hundreds of interviews, and is today a leading force in the fight on the cause of the white people, could say, and he is the editor of the Occidental Observer website, which is very prestigious and which every person who wants to be in this cause would like to write for, I'm sure. I think this would be enough for now. We will get into the rest of it, maybe.
Okay.
Professor MacDonald,
Glad to be here.
to Denmark.
Yes.
Is this the first time you're here?
Yes, it is the first time.
It's the first time.
To Denmark.
Did you like the country and the people so far?
So far, very nice. And I'm surprised how green it is and rural. And yes, very nice.
Because it rains so much.
Yes.
All right. Of course, you've tackled this problem of the Jews in the Western societies in a frontal way, you might say, and also in a very scholarly way. And I must say I admire you very much for the way you do it. I think anybody would admire this way, because you're both courageous to even talk about things that most people don't dare even get close to, and at the same time you can manage it in this scholarly and very kind way. Is also my impression. You do it in a very kind way. I've listened to several, many actually interviews, and also read your articles. They're always very filled with the facts, and just the pertinent facts, nothing more, nothing less. I would say if anybody could live up to those standards, you're doing it the standard way, no more, no less than what it takes.
Thank you.
Anyway,
I think that's been a problem. That so much of the discussion and writing about Jews that has been critical of them has not been well informed, has not been done at a scholarly, academic kind of level, and so it just ends up being name calling and that sort of thing, and really is not productive. So what I'm trying to do is understand it using the tools of evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, and other scientific methods, and hopefully to sort of change the way people think about it and talk about it.
I'm sure that happens. But would you say that, like probably you've been accused of having an obsession with Jews? Would you say that's an obsession? It's a long time interest, I'm sure, and you can tell us when that started. But an obsession, I would not think you would admit that.
Well, that's the funny thing. If somebody writes 3 books about banking or about immigration or something else, they don't say, well, he's got an obsession with this. But I have been accused of that. by some very intelligent people, like, what's wrong with him to have written 3 books about Jews and to continue to write about it? Well, you know, again, if you're doing it in any other area, nobody would care. Nobody would mention anything. But talking about Jews, there's something suspect about even being interested in this topic, which is absurd, because in fact there's very few people who talk about this and write about this from an informed scientific perspective. It's almost unheard of. So that's the real problem that these people have. They don't want somebody going into this area with academic tools to really think about, you know, how and why Jews behave the way they do. That has pretty much been off limits for any non-Jew. Exactly. To talk about. And of course, when Jews talk about it, they tend to have sort of self-justifying theories about their own behavior. You know, anti-Jewish attitudes are ascribed to psychiatric disorders or irrational prejudices, or you know, medieval Christianity or something like that. You know, that's how they want to think. They want everyone to think about anti-Semitism in that way. But that's simply, it's ridiculous. And if you view it as in a scientific way, if you see it as part of the sort of natural frictions between groups that have been going on throughout history, and not just with Jews and Europeans, but with a wide variety of ethnic groups around the world, you know, you see it in a very different light. But again, I don't think Jews want to see it in that light. They want to see it just as irrational, as something that's almost inexplicable, something that is just out of the dark ages somewhere.
Which you demonstrate very adeptly that it is not. It is pretty well footnoted, everything you do. And also, I don't know if that happened that way. You must have been thinking a little bit about what those Jews were up to for some time. But still, you started out with the psychology of wolves, which is a pretty far away from the present subject.
And frankly, I was not much interested in Jews. I didn't know much about Jews until I sort of got this idea. It began as a sort of theoretical idea, because in evolutionary biology, the idea of group strategies is very controversial. But I had the idea that humans, because we have culture, because we can police groups, and if there's any free riders, we can get rid of them if we want. That group strategies were possible with humans. And then I started thinking, well, what would be a good example of a group strategy? Obviously, Jews are an excellent example, where you have a very closed group that has thought of itself as separate and apart from the people it's lived among for centuries. Yeah. So I decided that would be a good group. So then I simply started to read about it. The first thing I did was I read the Old Testament.
Okay.
You know, I'd never read the Old Testament. I'm a typical Catholic, right? Never read the Old Testament. And as soon as I read it, I said, yes, there's a story here. Because the Old Testament is filled with concern about intermarriage, you know, with separateness, and keeping separate from the non-Jews. That's what the Old Testament is all about.
And they sort of stick out the Jews like a thing which you can't avoid. But
That's right.
It has most other scientists have managed to avoid it.
Right.
Obviously, and of course it's a question of courage also, because very soon after taking up this subject, you must have felt, oh, this could bring me some trouble.
I started to think about that for sure. But one thing I had going, I had tenure at my university, so I knew they couldn't fire me for this. And really, there wasn't much of a problem. In the first book, A People That Shall Dwell Alone, when I talked about Judaism as a group evolutionary strategy, you know, it was sort of theoretical. I don't think anybody would have gotten upset about that. But it was when I started talking about anti-Semitism in the second book and trying to explain historical anti-Semitism, and especially in the third book, when I really tried to explain and understand Jewish influence in the 20th century. Because now we're getting close to home.
The 20th
century.
That's what you're going to tell us about tomorrow evening.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that.
That is fantastic.
Culture of critique, and how I conceptualize it, how I went about doing it. But the point is, this is where people started to get upset.
Really?
And there was only 1 or 2 reviews in the scholarly literature of the third book, whereas the first book got reviewed pretty widely. It was pretty positive. You know, there's got fewer and fewer reviews. People didn't want to talk about it, and Yet I still haven't seen anybody come up with a critique of my work. That's the amazing thing. You don't find academics or people who are well informed about these things going after my data and stuff. It just hasn't happened. So
they're just going after you.
Yeah, there's a lot of ad hominem personal attacks.
And Jews, I see most of the things you get in the Wikipedia entry, which I brought with me here, it's Jews all over.
Wikipedia is just, it's impossible.
They're the experts on you.
Yeah, well, sometimes I've had friends of mine go into my Wikipedia page and try to change things, but it's immediately changed back. So you just can't win with that. They're all over it 24/7, and they're not going to allow any views on me or anything like that go out without strict censorship.
Right. So your luck has been, or actually it's also a bit of cleverness that you got your tenure. You have to work up to a certain level, and then you can start freedom of speech, maybe.
That's really what it is. But it just sort of worked out that way. I didn't really have these ideas. It gradually came to me. If you look at my publications, I wrote things on groups in a book in 1988. I got tenure shortly after that, and then that's when I started thinking about Jews, because I first started thinking about the Spartans, in ancient Greece, because you had the same kind of thing where you had a very sealed off group, but they did not intermarry with anybody else. They had certain strategies for socializing children and for becoming a sort of having the best army in the world. So they had a very different strategy, but it was a strategy nonetheless. And then I started thinking about Jews in those terms. So.